For decades, serial killer Dennis Rader confined the official narrative of his crimes to 10 murders he confessed to in Kansas. But buried beneath that carefully controlled confession was something else. A puzzle, a cipher he wrote in 2004 called Chapter 8. Most people dismiss Chapter 8 as more of Rader's narcissistic rambling, a piece of ego-driven fiction. But as you'll hear today, that assumption was a mistake. In this episode, we're going to walk you through how a document that sat untouched for 20 years now has revealed numerous previously unknown victims, the locations of 3 missing girls' remains, references to multiple offenders, and the possibility that Rader's crimes extended far beyond Kansas. And joining me today is someone whose insight has guided me through the legal and behavioral terrain of these findings, brilliant attorney and crime expert Kerrie Droban Zhivago. Before we dive into these new discoveries, let's set the stage. Chapter 8 is a word puzzle or coded passage written by Rader in 2004 that he sent before his apprehension. In typical Dennis fashion, he framed a quasi-fictional chapter of a story, but anyone who studies serial killers knows they often hide their truth inside fiction, using confessions as narratives to control the release of information. What we now know is this: Chapter 8 wasn't fiction. It was a map, a confession in code, a ledger of crimes he never admitted to. No one had been able to decode it until I stepped up to the plate. I had no expectation it would unravel into one of the most significant investigative developments in these cases in decades. But the patterns weren't random, the word pairings were not meaningless, and the geographic references were definitely not metaphors. My decoding as of present day for all of you listening, 14 previously unknown victims described in detail, including methods consistent with Rader's known behaviors, and more disturbingly, evolutions of those behaviors. This does not include Cynthia Dawn Kinney, who was originally discovered by a sheriff in Oklahoma. I've also uncovered 3 missing girls whose locations are now encoded in the puzzle, one of which we cannot reveal publicly as this update has come in recent weeks, and we must respect the integrity of these investigations. Amber Barker and Cindy Kinney were referenced with spatial and behavioral markers linked to Oklahoma and matched to the cipher and tied to the KBI sketches. Direct matches to sketches found under Rader's concrete slab in 2023 correspond with victims' names and other details that are key. The puzzle also references partners, actors, and others involved, including encoded indicators that Rader operated outside of Kansas with others, specifically linking to Charles Ray Vines, whose victim set aligns with the puzzle's data. Locations where he buried this evidence, 2 specific sites identified in explicit symbolic form, along with admissions he framed other men. Talks about deliberate staging, misleading law enforcement, and it matches what we've seen in multiple cases now under reevaluation. Most importantly, y'all, none of these connections existed before my decoding, except for Cynthia Dawn Kinney's. No one had tied Rader to Vines. No one had tied the cipher to these missing girls. No one had recognized its connection to the sketches under the slab. This episode isn't about revisiting a known story. It's about rewriting what we thought we knew. Nobody understands the behavioral and legal implications of this kind of decoding better than author, attorney, and crime expert Kerrie Droban Zhivago. She spent her career inside the minds of killers and exposing hidden conspiracies, outlaw biker gangs, and predator networks. Kerrie's an incredible person, and we're so glad to have her here live with us today. Thanks for joining. Your narrative has received such positive feedback from our viewers.
Aww.
And I just want to thank you for that, because you truly brought life back to her case.
Thank you.
Very much appreciate that. Your talent spoken for through that.
Well, thank you.
I know that you and I share a similar passion, and we understand the ripple effect of these cases.
Yes, definitely. I think it's really important to keep these cases top of mind because, as you have discovered, evidence is always evolving and coming to light. And I think the more that we have possible outstanding victims that haven't yet been discovered, I think it's really important to keep them top of mind, to keep their memories top of mind.
Yes. As we explore Cindy Kinney, Cynthia Dawn Kinney is her full name for everybody. She was this young woman, this vibrant life at 16 years old, looking toward the future, taken. No one knows what happened to her. So that mystery has remained since the mid 70s.
Yeah, it is quite fascinating. Some of the information that you've discovered or uncovered recently. Cindy, I wanted to really depict her as somebody that we could all relate to. She was just at the beginning of her life, and I think the unnerving part of her case is how ordinary she seemed, and yet how extraordinary her life has become because of what happened to her, because of how she just vanished into thin air seemingly, and nobody has any clues as to what happened to her.
I'm sure for her family, her life is not defined in these last moments that they remember her. I just can't even imagine what they're going through. Her father, Don, has made some statements in recent years when the Osage County Sheriff came forward and they had decoded her name from that Chapter 8 puzzle.
Right. That's really the fascinating part of this, is that she is, that I think for the families particularly, I don't believe survivors of those kinds of tragedies and traumas ever really fully recover. It's not that they receive closure when new light comes to the case. They get some answers solved or, resolved in their mind, but it doesn't bring them closure, because I don't believe closure is ever a thing, when a loved one is gone. And I think the fact that you've been able to decode some of the geographic, linguistic, behavioral tie-ins to BTK is really, it's fascinating and also helpful in terms of, how serial offenders hunt, how they're tracked across state lines. It gives us insight into how they operate. I think for all of those reasons, it's really important to keep not only Cindy's memory alive, but also the hunt alive for her killer.
Yes, her family, her friends, everyone within Pahuska, within the county out in Oklahoma, this lived with them. It still lives with them. In 2023, to introduce the theory and the possibility that Dennis Rader is responsible for her disappearance has to be terrible. What would you call this cipher in general? We know that this was created by Dennis Rader. It's been verified. Is this a piece of evidence, Kerrie? Or how would you describe this? A confession?
It is a confession of sorts, because it's a psychological signature. It establishes some identity, and more so his identity than his modus operandi, because modus operandi can change over time. It can evolve. It's basically, serial killers will lie in code, so it gives us insight into his pathology. It's not that it's. I think from a legal standpoint, it's really important to look at decoded material like sketches and ciphers and taunting letters as not just this macabre artwork. We're evaluating a crime scene, and the crime scene is coming straight from the killer. One of the things that I think is really important in looking at his ciphers is, what are these? Can they be authenticated? Do they corroborate with his actual crime scenes? Do the codes reveal non-public details? Do they connect to known victims and timelines? We're looking at the intent behind this. Is it a confession of sorts? I believe that it is. I believe it's a window into his psyche, into how he taunts law enforcement, how he reveals himself. He's not interested in masking his identity. He's interested in sharing drips and spreading popcorn in the forest. He wants people to uncover and discover his perceived brilliance. He's superior to law enforcement. That's really what he's going after with these ciphers. And in sort of the work of, not just BTK, but we see a lot of other serial killers who have borrowed that example of just bringing forth their crime. It's like reliving their own fantasy of the crime and taunting police and saying, "This, catch me if you can," kind of thing. So I think it is a confession.
I would agree with you that it is. I like that reference that you used about the popcorn in the forest, because he really wants that to stand out to you. There was something about specifically the communication with Mary Fager that we talked about in our last episode, and you and I are going to go into further with this, because I have been doing more decodings this week, which I've been sharing with you and some other colleagues that are involved in the show. And it's almost as if we're trying to understand that when Dennis left Wichita as BTK, because with that Fager communication, he wrote that it was January 5th, 1988. I believe it was the day of the funeral for Mary. That was his last known communication as BTK until 2004. When he left the area, is it possible that the MO changed, obviously, but that he separated himself from BTK and evolved into a different type of predator in these other areas?
Yeah, I think there are multiple reasons for that. I think if we look at the pattern that he had established even prior to the Fagers, the pattern was he never tells the whole truth. He only tells the next piece of it, right? So he creates the clues so that he can be the solution. He needs investigators to keep responding to him. That's what fuels him. I think this whole idea of a dual identity is really interesting because a lot of serial killers, and BTK included, has created this sort of duality. And one of the reasons they do that is either they're evolving, as you've indicated, or they are on the verge of perhaps being caught. They don't want to be caught. They're creating this sort of alter personality so that they can do one set of killings as BTK, bind, torture, kill, and the next set of killings as Dennis Rader, or as this alter. I don't want to call them alter ego because they're really the same sort of killer. It provides him not only this idea of he's getting away with something, catch me if you can, but it's also this sort of compulsion to keep the police interested, to keep the law enforcement wanting to pursue him and to find out who he really is. I think there are lots of reasons for having that duality. It's the very practical reason that he has a double life. You know, he has to maintain this semblance of normalcy, right? He's married, he has a family, and he's got to maintain that. If he's on the verge of being caught, he's going to distance himself from this alter image that he's created.
Without a doubt. You said something to me that is, I think, very important to highlight, especially after what I decoded yesterday and shared with you, because I'm really trying to dig deeper into that cipher. Wendy talks about it being almost like poetry. There's so many layers to it. Wendy's even said she doesn't believe that that was meant to be solved. When we really look at, so what you said earlier, you talked about how he was potentially close to getting caught. When we explore the idea that his wife, Paula Rader, was suspicious of him, she had made comments to him that he did speak on in the mid-'80s about how he wrote like BTK, and then he stopped the communications after denying the Fagers. And the thing that's most interesting about that is, from what I decoded yesterday, and you saw that in the top section, and I'm showing it here on the screen for everybody listening, do you think that this was perhaps something that we never explored or that hasn't been explored about really why Dennis did what he did and only confessed to the 10?
Yeah, I believe that it's definitely, it goes to this whole idea of what is authentic and what is misdirection, right? What does he want? Because I agree with you. I don't think that he ever really wanted it to be solved. I think his motive was he wanted to keep dropping clues. He doesn't want the Fagers to be part of his, and that he confessed to, but then the Fagers and Cindy Kinney are part of this other extension, right? That there are more victims. And I believe that too. I believe that he's evolving over time, or he's perfecting his MO, or he's even perfecting his signature, which are his ciphers, which are his clues. Sometimes the ciphers can become more, not necessarily poetry, but I guess more disorganized in a sense, because he's becoming a little concerned that he's going to be outed or that he's going to be caught. You can see that sort of in his ciphers. He's got everything's in all caps. He's dropping bits and pieces of location, geography. So I think all of that speaks to how he is not only evolving, but also protecting his identity.
Yes, definitely. If you notice there, this is where I started yesterday. It's been quite a week to be on the show and to say, hey, I'm about to go find this spiral staircase noted here. There it is, right through the Fagers' names in the top section. Then to see there, if you look in the top left-hand corner of chapter 8, you'll see that my wife is what starts the entire cipher. And so if you look at it as almost like an intro, you know, if you're going to read a story, so your eye is going to naturally go to that space right there. If he was telling his true story through this, victims that he kept to himself, that were not recognized in the public in Wichita as BTKs, he would tell
tell almost a story. There's quite a few communications that were included with this cipher that are not public. And one of them was something like BTK, the true story, or something like that. He was telling his story.
Right. Well, he wants to be, I think this is true for really most serial killers. They want to be known for something. That's why he has the initials BTK. He wants people to know this is what he does. And I agree that he is telling the story. So the fact that he's confessed to the 10 and then there are these others, either he's keeping them, it's all performance. It's his final act. This is the secret that has never been decoded. This is his real story. And he's going to make sure that people know it. When we uncover, my wife knows I'm telling lies, she's on to me. These are the victims that have never been discovered or uncovered before. He's continuing to taunt. And the ciphers continue to show not only geography, but location. You've got here the staircase, the horrific photos of his drawings, the bind, torture, kill drawings. I think they all show like this is the real story. This is me before I became this. They're all telling the story of how he's either concealing his victims or how he chose not to reveal certain things, but now because his wife is onto him, have to be revealed. I think that you're going to find more out there, more victims that will be discovered and uncovered.
Most serial killers operate alone, but not all. There is a documented phenomenon of serial killer partnerships, sometimes called team killers or duos. They tend to share the thrill, fantasy, resources, or victim pools. A few examples are shown here. What makes the Rader-Vines connection so compelling is that Chapter 8 does not merely mention Vines. It references victims that match Vines' case locations, timelines, and signatures, cases where he was a known suspect. It echoes movement elements like the creation of death-fetish pornography, something Rader admits fascinated him. Rader may have collaborated, imitated, or inserted himself into Vine's victim sphere, but the cipher confirms awareness and direct reference. This decoding is not academic, it's actionable. We have now the locations for the 3 missing girls who have been gone for decades. We have evidence of coordinated behaviors across Oklahoma, Kansas, and Arkansas. We have 2 sites where Rader claims he buried physical evidence, and we have victims whose names and stories have never been acknowledged. For the families of all of these people, this could be the first real movement that they've had in decades. For investigators, it's a blueprint. For the public, it challenges everything we thought we knew about Dennis Rader. It's proof that the story isn't over. In fact, the story is only now emerging. A lot of people have asked how I do this work, how I can take a document and pull out patterns that haven't surfaced in 20 years. My background is in forensic behavioral profiling, geographical crime analysis, linguistic pattern recognition, and victimology alignment across offender timelines. I don't approach these ciphers as puzzles. I approach them as crime scenes compressed into language. Patterns in syntax, spacing, repeated elements, symbology, spatial cues, and offender fantasy constructs, often to reveal more truth than a written confession. This is how Chapter 8 decoding became a roadmap, not a theory. So now that you understand the landscape, the victims, the codes, the possible partnerships, and the implications, it's time to bring in what this means.
The idea that he could have started with Cindy Kinney in 1976 down in Oklahoma tells us a lot about his early years. Is it possible that that's not even his first victim?
Oh, I think it's absolutely possible. It's not. And I think his killing would have evolved over time. It's very likely that his very first victim would have been a random person and it could have gone horribly wrong, which is how he evolved into this ritual of bind, torture, kill. I think this is something that he's perfected over time. It's very possible that Cindy and the Fagers were not part of his confession, right? His 10, because they were messier in some fashion, or they were more experimental than some of his others. And so I think that you see that consistently across the board with a lot of serial killers.
When we look geographically, they had placed him in the area. He's close by here. He was in the towns right next to this area. He had family down here. So the idea that he had been frequenting this area is not too far out of the question. Somebody that has perfected, as you say, I would agree with you, Kerrie, because it's almost like he also developed his preferences. He liked the home invasion, the stalking, the going inside the home. If he's stalking someone at a laundromat, yeah, that might have did it for him, but it's not really fitting that ritual, that whole ritual for him, which has to do with that long-term stalking phase of going in the homes, taking things. And also what I explored this week, I said, well, if he was taking all these things during this process, would he not also leave something, not just during the commission of the crime, but before the crime took place, to sort of complete this ritual, as we might label it? And did I not find something very specific as far as potentially locating more evidence this week, Kerrie?
Right, exactly. I think you nailed it. With the earlier victims, I think he was trying to establish not only what was going to fulfill his fantasy, right? His actual, I mean, all of this stuff evolved, the finding, the torture, the killing. I mean, he had to not only figure out who his victim was going to be, and in his mind, you're right. I mean, I think he had more of that satisfaction, more of that high, if you will, annihilating families. That became his MO, stalking entire families and figuring out how he was going to annihilate all of them rather than these individual victims. And I think that with Cindy Kinney, it's certainly, I mean, he's got the geographic location. It's only 2 hours outside of Wichita. It was easy for him to travel to hunt behavior, which is not spontaneous victim selection, right? He often chose his location. He chose something that was isolated but accessible, but it probably did not satisfy the urge that he had and the urge to be bigger and bolder, which would be to take out whole families. I think we're seeing the beginnings of who he eventually became as BTK.
Being able to get to someone within their home, entire families, for this annihilation, it was a way for him to contain that experience more so than having to consider all these other factors that he might have learned if he did in fact take Cindy and have to take her out into the woods, which in John Douglas's book, he does talk about it. If I was going to do things different, this is what I'd do. And he loved to talk about those kinds of things, probably not only to relive that, but to maintain this domination and power control complex that he's just notorious for.
Right, exactly. And plus reduce the risk of exposure. I mean, if you're moving a victim from one crime scene to another, you're obviously risking somebody seeing you, some exposure, and leaving behind evidence, clues for people to find, which is to your point, So I think that he, in doing those earlier victims, and I do believe that Cindy is not the first, he's experimenting with what he can get away with and what else he needs to fulfill and satisfy that fantasy. And so he's starting these ciphers, which become these linguistic fingerprints, if you will. This is how it's not enough for him to just take these victims and murder them. He needs to be able to be known for it too. And so that's how these ciphers come to pass, not only so that he can relive them and read them and toy with the idea of that he got away with something, but also so that he can taunt the police.
No doubt about that. And taunting police is what he moved on to do within Wichita. When I'm able to visualize him through my methods doing this and then decode it right here, plain as day, it's not that I'm just going and searching for random words. Even within the top portion here, and I'd always wondered why there were so many B's, the column. I'm like, why did he put multiple B's here? It always stood out to me. Well, this week I found out why. And it was just like, when I saw him burying, and it's possible that, and I'd like to know your opinion on this, when he talks about how he left something outside, it says right here, y'all, it says, I left something outside under the bushes, buried in plastic. Y'all can see clear as day that this is right here on the top portion of this, right through the Fager's names, right through the details. Spiral staircase in the basement. I tied them to the spiral staircase, used tape to bind them. And then he goes on to talk about a lot of things that he did. I mean, I'm not going to give everything away here for sake of the investigation, but ultimately he talks about how in the yard, and I've scoured this yard. Okay, I've stalked this house to the degree online that I can. I have before the renovation photos, I have after. we're looking at the yard was disturbed in the front, but most likely he did this under the cover of, it was a, y'all can see here, it's a fenced in yard, has a privacy fence. It is possible that that evidence is still out there, is it not, Kerrie?
It is possible. Yeah. I think all of this, it's so disturbing, but it really is such an insight into his pathology, into what's important to him. What's important to him is the staging performance. It's the ritual. And so you have to think about, what is he leaving in plastic for investigators to potentially find? I mean, is it taunting them? Is it something that he's saying, look, you guys haven't found me yet, so here it is? Was that the tipping point for him? He's leaving he's almost breaking pattern in a way. We don't know, because we haven't found that particular verbiage in other ciphers, but it's almost as if he's saying, look, you guys haven't found me yet, and I need this cat and mouse game to escalate, because that's what part of his high, that's part of what he gets out of each of these. It's not just the binding, torture, and killing of these victims, but it's also this hunt, right? He likes to be one step ahead of law enforcement. So for him to leave a clue, I mean, not only is he leaving a silhouette of his face, right, which is, catch me if you can. Here's my signature, guys. But I'm also going to leave something for you. What does he leave? Who knows, right? I mean, does he leave a lock of hair? Does he leave a piece of rope? What does he leave that is going to be one more clue? And mind you, it's not going to be a clue that's going to out him. It's going to be something that will baffle and perplex law enforcement, but keep them on the hunt. That's my theory of what he's doing.
Yes. I mean, the whole baffle and perplex thing is definitely him. And even to be the master of these codes, of these secrets, it's something that he still holds on to this very moment.
It's his whole signature. How he phrases things, his spelling patterns, the fact that he does leave a poem to Mary Fager. I mean, it's all of it is symbols and motifs that seem to recur across BTK's known cases. And so you're seeing that here. I would wager everything is so carefully organized and planned to have the spiral staircase be a center point or focal point of where the tortures happen is obviously really significant to BTK. It's, if you want to talk symbols, everything is spiraling down, right? It's confusing, circular, if you will. If you want to really get into the weeds of what all of these patterns are, he's basically giving directions to law enforcement. And some of it is misdirected because that's part of his game. But I think you're right on by really drilling down into each one of these details, because it's all very strategic. I mean, he's not a random killer here. He's somebody that has really thought this out. As you indicated, he stalked his victims. He understood their patterns, right? Their patterns of behavior, so that he could catch them unaware and do what he did to them. And I think all of that is relevant and significant.
Yes, I would agree with you. And I think it's just interesting also the framing of innocent men, which has come up now in 3 separate cases of Chapter 8 victims.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's part of the whole cat and mouse kind of game. It's not me, it's this other person. And that goes to the staging too. It's all very strategic. It's a series of events that he's enjoying. It's like he's creating his own theater, and then he's writing the story. The story is the cipher. And it's basically, if you can decode the story and the narrative, you'll figure out why he did it.
He's given the addresses, ladies and gentlemen, the addresses of not only where these crimes took place, if there was a crime scene, which these are still speculation at this point. We don't know. When you see he's admitted where her body is and he's given numerous landmarks. I mean, how do you feel about this?
I think that's very consistent with his signature. This is part of how he plays. He's not interested in hiding the ball. He's interested in being superior and being ego-driven. And it's all showing law enforcement, look, I'm smarter than you. I'm literally showing you. I'm spelling it out. And if you're smart enough to figure it out, then you'll figure out that not only did I commit this crime, but here's where the body is, right? And so if you're not smart enough to figure it out, then you don't deserve to know. And that's sort of his whole MO, it's his whole narrative, and he's enjoying that. Again, he's not about hiding the ball. The ciphers are about his identity. He wants to be known, right? He wants to show you this is all in his control. This is all his symbols. It's his putting the MO out there. And why, I mean, and I'm pretty sure that if we drilled down and continued looking at these ciphers, we would discover why Cindy was one of his victims, why he chose to take her and where he took her. There's probably symbolism in the location that he took her, because nothing is random in his world. This is all theater, it's all performance, and he is telling his story, and he wants people to find those clues. Not necessary to solve anything, because again, he is the solution.
I love that interpretation. Talking about how that this is his identity that he's trying to showcase is just something else, Kerrie. I never really thought about it. Him admitting that he potentially worked with these other killers, other criminals, and he admits that in this puzzle. We don't know that to be a fact, but when you even look at the composite sketches that were released when they were looking for Dennis, and you look at the picture of Charles Vines, it looks like the same person. I mean, if anything, those composites look exactly like Charles Vines.
Right. I know. It's really fascinating. It kind of goes to the whole of when you're tracking a serial killer like BTK and some of his contemporaries, you have to think like them. You almost have to dispense with some of the conventional investigative tools, because if you can get into his pathology, what is he doing here? Again, he's not interested in hiding the ball. He's interested in being superior to law enforcement, in being the one that's controlling the entire story, the entire scenario. So it's not that he wants to get caught. It's that he's better than they are. And he's showing them, look, if you could just read between the lines, guys, if you could just figure out what I'm trying to say here, because it's there on the page. I'm giving you the suspects. I'm giving you the murder scene. I'm giving you the addresses, and none of you are figuring it out. That is what is fueling his high, right? His fantasy. That's what's fascinating about this. You would know if it was it's not misdirection. It's basically, this is who I am. You guys aren't figuring it out, and I'm going to keep doing this until you do figure it out.
In our next episode, we'll learn more about serial killer Charles Ray Vines, who terrorized the Fort Smith area and has connections to Rader in Chapter 8 that are undeniable. Thank you for joining us here at Alternative Eye Beyond the File. Please subscribe to us on YouTube and visit our website, thealternativeeye.com, to stay up to date. We have new releases, expert rollouts. You can also download the cipher, Chapter 8, and decode these communications alongside us. We will be releasing codes with each episode, and we look forward to having you contribute to these investigations with us. Stay safe and stay up. Stay sharp and keep thinking at Alternative Eye.